me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello.
Good afternoon, everybody. 5 o'clock on a Friday. Time to stop whatever you were doing and listen to another edition of Cello Chat. And with me this week, I'm very excited, Dr. Robert Jesselson. Dr. Jesselson, how are you?
Well, I'm doing well today. As you can see, I've had quite an injury, and I tore my rotator cuff, two tendons in the rotator cuff recently, and so I'm having to wear this strap right now. And had surgery a week ago, and about to do some physical therapy, and it'll be kind of a long haul before I'm able to play again. So on that level, not doing so well.
But spiritually, mentally?
Yeah, I have a lot of projects that I'm thinking about and doing, and I appreciate being here today with you.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm thrilled to have you on the show. So let's start with, can you describe just how you got started in music, in cello in the first place, and the training that led you to your illustrious career?
Yeah, well, I started playing the cello actually quite late, so this is sort of an unusual story for a professional musician, professional cellist. I had kind of played the cello a little bit in school, but never had lessons. And I went off to college. I thought I was going to become a doctor, and I took all the chemistry and biology courses, and then I switched over to anthropology and linguistics. And I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. It was the late '60s, and of course, the anti-war movement. I got involved with that, and I got involved with radio actually. And one of the important early stations from NPR, it's WBFO in Buffalo, and I became the music director of that station, and met a lot of musicians through that. And actually, a lot of people who from that station, WBFO, went on and became NPR illuminaries. Terry Gross, who does Fresh Air, came from that, and Ira Flatow, who does Science Friday, and Bill Siemering was the brains behind the whole thing. He became a MacArthur Genius Prize winner, and he was the first programming director of NPR. Anyway, that station, WBFO, was an exciting place to be in the late 60s. And so I met a couple of musicians there who then went to Freiburg, Germany, to study. And I followed them one summer and stayed with them, and I got excited by what they were doing, and they encouraged me to go and play for the cellist who was there, Marcel Severa, who was teaching at Freiburg at the conservatory. So I went and I played for him, and he listened to me and he said, "There's no way I can accept you," because I had basically no technique and really no repertoire. So he said, if you want, go study with a student of mine for a year and come back, and we'll see, if you made progress. So I actually did that because I really just didn't know what I wanted to do in life. I was kind of lost, and I studied with one of his students for a year and came back. I was ready to do the Aufnahmeprüfung on a Wednesday, and I had a ticket ready to come back to the United States for on a Friday, but I just thinking that I wasn't going to be accepted by the conservatory. And I played for him, and he said, "Wow, you made so much progress," and he accepted me. And so I stayed there for another 5 years in Freiburg, and he is responsible really for everything that I had then in the future. I mean, he gave me an amazing understanding of the cello, of technique, of repertoire, and he was just the perfect teacher for me. And that situation was the perfect situation for me because I basically practiced for 10 or 12 hours a day. In the German system, you don't have to take lots of classes. You can really just, all you have to do is take the final exams on theory or music history or anything. And so I did that. I practiced basically the whole day for 5 years and did nothing else, and then took the final exams and everything else. I had studied by myself, took a few classes, but really not that much. And at the end of that time, so I passed the exams and so forth, and it just happened that Severa got a call from a friend of his in Spain. He's Severa's Spanish Catalan from Barcelona, and a friend of his was the conductor of the orchestra in the Canary Islands in Las Palmas. And he said, "Oh, I need a principal cellist for the orchestra." And so I said, "Oh, I have this American cellist who just graduated. You might be interested." So, without even an audition, without even talking to the conductor, Marcel Goals, I flew to Canary Islands and I walked into my first rehearsal there, which was a cello sectional. And as I walk in, all 12 cellos, they stand up and they go, "Hola, maestro." And so here I was coming from a lowly student who had been working really, really hard, and all of a sudden I was a maestro. Anyway, I stayed there for a year, had great opportunities there playing not only in the orchestra, but playing concertos with the orchestra, a number of different concertos, and doing lots of touring with the orchestra around the different islands of the Canary Islands and so forth. It was a great first job. And of course, nowadays, who can just walk into a job like that without even an audition? Unfortunately, that's the name of the game now, but it was a little different back then. So I stayed for a year there and decided I really needed to go on and study more. So I auditioned at Eastman with Paul Katz, and he accepted me. I stayed there for 2 years, got my master's, and again, very, very fortunately, I was just very, very lucky. Did one audition for one job at a university to teach, because I knew by then that I really wanted to teach as well as play. And I got the job at Montana State University. My first job that I auditioned for and just got it. And that too was a fantastic place to be for a first job. The head of the string area was a violinist by the name of Creech Reynolds, who was a wonderful sort of mentor for a first job like that. He's actually the father of Mike Reynolds. Some of you may know Mike, cellist. And so I stayed there for 2 years and then decided Montana was beautiful. It was a wonderful place, had wonderful students, but I felt like I probably couldn't grow as much as I wanted, especially in the areas that I wanted to grow in. So I did apply for the job then here at USC. And that was 1981, I guess it was, and stayed there at USC for about 40 years. And that was the kind of position that really allowed me to experiment in the areas that I wanted to and build in the areas that I wanted to. When I came here to USC, this was really known as a band school. There wasn't much going on with strings at all. And in fact, I had one cello student when I came, and she left after one semester and went into the Army. So I had no cello students after that for the first semester. But I've had to figure out, how do I recruit, how do I build the program? And that was a really interesting thing, because here at USC there was a program called the String Project, USC String Project, which was designed to teach young people to play string instruments with undergraduate students doing the teaching, so that the undergraduate students would get experience in teaching during their college years. And it was a very small program. There were only about 30 students, but there was a lot of potential in that. They had set aside enough money to be able to recruit students as undergraduates at the university, which wasn't really being used. That money wasn't being used. And I had sort of a vision of being able to really grow this program into something bigger. My background was not at all in teaching in public schools, and that sort of pedagogy of class teaching and so forth, I had no idea about from Germany or any of my other positions. So it was a real sort of growing kind of pain kind of thing. I had to figure out a lot of stuff about it. But the second year that I was here, second or third year I was here, I brought in Phyllis Young from the University of Texas, who was the grandmother of string projects, having built an amazing program at UT. And I brought her in, and she did a whole bunch of workshops and things like that. And she basically sat down with me and gave me the blueprint for how to build a string project of the sort that what she had. Hers, it was a little bit different from what we did, because hers was mostly graduate students who were doing the teaching, and we were interested in undergraduate students, which I felt was really more important for South Carolina and this region, where there were basically no programs in public schools at all. When I started the string project, there was one string program in Columbia, South Carolina. By the time we grew the program, eventually to about 350 students and about 25 to 30 teachers, we had every elementary, middle, and high school started string programs. So now there are orchestras in all of the programs here, not only in Columbia, but around the area also. So it really changed the scene. It changed the nature of who's playing a string instrument. It wasn't as much an elite thing anymore. One of the great things about the String Project is that we charge very, very low fees, maybe $10 for an entire semester of lessons, group lessons, and then also private lessons and orchestras and things like that. So one of the things that along the way of my career, which actually I was wanted to say to people who are watching this program, is that sometimes one takes opportunities for things that you didn't know you even were ready for or could do. In this case, and this happened with me for a number of different kinds of things, but in this case with the String Project, it was that I had no background in string teaching in the public schools, that sort of pedagogy. I knew about private lesson teaching, but not that sort of pedagogy. And I relied on a lot of other people, experts in the field. Pam Telejohn Hayes happened to be here, and she's one of the big luminaries, one of the big names in public school teaching, and Deborah Perkins, who came out of the UT program also, was a master teacher, and Johanna Pollack, another. I had these wonderful people who were experts in that, and I relied on them, but I was the kind of brains behind building that program. And I found that I was good at organizing things as well. So that's a maybe longer than you wanted snapshot of my career up to this point when I'm, of course, retired.
No, that's great. That's great. Now, what was it that drew you to cello in the first place?
Well, I heard the instrument. I guess I was in fifth grade or something, and I heard the cello. They demonstrated the instruments, and I liked the sound. And music had been in my family. My parents loved music. We listened to even opera on Saturdays, the Metropolitan Opera. My father loved music, but it just wasn't part of, something really, really important in terms of what I was doing. I did lots of different kinds of things. I had lots of interests in elementary school and high school, and I wasn't really focused on music at all. So I hadn't thought of really becoming a professional musician. But I would say that one of the things that has driven me all along and helped me all along is the fact that I had some really great mentors along the way. And I loved the cello and always did love the sound and so forth. But these were people that somehow they're the right people at the right time that really, really helped me. And I'm sure that most people, if you think about it, you've had these kinds of mentors. For me, early on, it was a neighbor who played the guitar, and she just, I just loved listening to her, and she would sometimes organize little concerts and things. And then in elementary school, I had a music teacher whose name truly was Miss Beethoven. Her name is Jane Beethoven. It really was. And she was also inspirational just in the terms of loving music and communicating that love. And then, of course, I had these three wonderful teachers, Marcel Severa and Paul Katz, and then after that, Bernard Greenhouse, who gave me different aspects of playing. Severa, the fundamentals, the technique, and so forth, and then Paul Katz with all just special kinds of things and lots of repertoire and beautiful vibrato kinds of things. And Greenhouse, then the icing on the cake with his large-scale understanding of music. And I went through an enormous amount of repertoire with him during my doctorate, and all the really big pieces, Sinfonia Concertante, the Shostakovich Concerto, all the sixth suite, the fifth suite, so forth and so on, all the big stuff. So those people, of course, were really important. And then people like Phyllis Young. She was, I have to say, I never studied with her as such, but she was really a mentor and somebody who inspired me along the way. And one other person I guess I should mention who helped me with understanding these sort of projects and non-cello kinds of things was a woman named Virginia Aldrich, who started the Governor's School for the Arts here in South Carolina, in Greenville, South Carolina. And I taught there for 15 years. And she was one of these people who knew how to put the pieces together to build something and really sustain it and grow it. And so her ideas were really helpful with the string project also, and then also after that with ASTA and as president of ASTA, and with the NSPC, the National String Project Consortium, when we built about 30 string projects based on the USC string project model, all over the country at different other universities. And then I started a school called MAC, the Midlands Arts Conservatory, which is an art school here in Columbia, South Carolina, for elementary and then high school students. So those kind of projects were completely out of the realm of being a cellist. And those people, those mentors, were really, really helpful in figuring out how to do those kinds of things.
Outstanding. Now, a lot of the people that I interview are people who, like, once we've had, those of us who've had a successful professional career tend to be motivated all the time, self-motivated. And a lot of our students, I think, that are drawn to us are as well. But what are your thoughts on motivating students to practice, whether it's just a particular lull that they're having at the time, or just some of the people who haven't yet figured out a way to get over the hump to where they found a joy in the process of practicing that then allows them to advance at the rate that makes them keep wanting to practice more, etc.?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is to help set goals for people. I know that's helpful for myself. Even as a retired person now, I want to keep going with playing the cello, although I can't play right now. But I want to be able to keep going. And so when I started my retirement, I figured, okay, here's now the time. First of all, I'm going to be playing a Bach suite from memory every day, and I'm going to go through these etudes, and I'm going to keep. I had certain goals of what I wanted to do, even just in my own daily practice, and trying to keep up that practice. I have to say that generally for my students, I haven't had to kind of infuse, enthusiasm in trying to figure out, how to get them to practice, because I set from the very get-go with each student, I sit them down and I tell them, here's the deal. You're going to have to be practicing an hour and a half a day, even the high school students and pre-college students. This is my expectation, and I want them to really understand that this isn't sort of a part-time kind of thing. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it right. So the people who come to study with me are generally, they already know that. My reputation is out there. They know that I'm going to be pretty serious about things. And the other thing is that as far as weekly lessons, it's going to be every week, and no excuses. Yeah, I mean, sometimes something will happen. We'll change the day of the lesson or something like that. But I'm not into one of these kind of part-time, let's do every other week, or some students sometimes ask, can we have, one lesson every 3 weeks or whatever it is. That doesn't work for me because of my philosophy of sort of sequential teaching, that you have to go one step at a time. And it builds then one step at a time. So very slow steps that move up, and all of a sudden you're playing at a much higher level. So I guess because of that, I haven't really had to try to do stuff, to encourage students to, have the enthusiasm and whatever to practice. They understand that from the get-go. I have occasionally had, situations with students. I had this one of the earliest students I had here in Columbia, South Carolina. One of the first cello students was a very, very talented, I think she was in maybe 8th grade. And she was playing amazing. She was playing Haydn D major concerto really well at that age already. And I taught her for a couple of years, but she always didn't seem particularly happy, in coming in. She was always prepared, and it was always good and so forth. Her mom was probably kind of a tiger mom, and she was always there and was always right. But finally I got to the point, I don't know, maybe she was in 9th grade or 10th grade or something, and I said, why are you doing this? Are you doing this because you love playing the cello, or why are you doing this? And she said, no, I'm doing it because my mom makes me. And I said, well, I don't want to participate in this anymore. And I talked to the mom, and I talked to her, and I said, if the child does not want to be doing this, I don't want to be forcing her to be doing something she doesn't want to do. So we stopped the lessons. And about, a year later, I got a telephone call. She said, hi, Dr. J. I want to take cello. I said, yeah, okay, your mom's making you call and say that? She said, no, I really, really want to do it. And she did. And she continued then on and did amazingly well and went on to MIT, actually, and became the principal cellist of their orchestra at MIT, which I guess is a fantastic orchestra because there are a lot of smart people there. But, she didn't become a professional cellist. And in fact, that's not my goal at all with any of my pre-college students. The college students, they've already decided they're going to do a career, and so I wanted to help them move along that direction. But the pre-college students, some of them end up going to conservatories or to colleges or whatever, and some of them are wonderful players up through 12th grade and do concertos and all kinds of stuff, and then go off and become doctors and lawyers, and that's great too, because they're going to be the listeners, and many of them just also continue on playing. But in terms of that sort of thing, I think for every student, it's a matter of setting goals. For teachers, I think one of the things we need to do is sort of be really good psychologists and understand the students, get inside their brains, and try to help them figure out, and us figure out, we have to understand what will help drive them. Why do they want to do something? So for some students, it's because they like competition. So then, so they're going to go the competition route. We'll do some little MTNA competitions and so forth, local concerto competitions. Other students, they just love the sound of the music. They love the sound of the cello. Other students, everybody has a sort of a different reason. Some of them, I remember one student at the governor's school. So she was like in 10th grade, I guess, that summer for the governor's school. She came in and she did amazingly well over those 5 weeks. And at the end, I said, do you realize how much progress you made? And she said, no. And I was sort of disappointed because it was really amazing what she had done from the beginning to the end of that time. She went off to school, and I got a call a couple of weeks into the school year, and she said, guess what? I went from last cellist in my orchestra to first cellist in my orchestra. And suddenly she realized why she, had all the progress that she had made. She actually went on, she came to USC and studied with me at USC and became a teacher and is now in Atlanta as a performer and a teacher also. But that was like, these sort of light bulb moments are really wonderful. But I think it behooves us to really understand what drives a student as a teacher, and for the students themselves to help them understand why they're doing stuff.
I agreed, and for them to understand as well. And that I'm using that as a segue. I think the first time I ran across your name was the article from early 90s called the How to Practice Flowchart, which is just a really, I love how concentrated it is, but for some of them, just thinking through those if-thens, and then what do I do as a result? And so as compact as that is, then another one of your articles I like very much, the 86 questions we studio teachers should all be asking ourselves. I dare say by extension, every one of those questions, it's good for the student to ask themselves, even if they're not teaching, because in a way they are teaching themselves when they practice. They're trying to follow so many of those. So do you want to comment a little on either the evolution of what led to those, or actually you probably, the feedback that you've gotten from students as to that sort of the usefulness of that approach?
Yeah, I think the How to Practice flowchart is a good example of my sort of my philosophy of teaching, which is very sequential, that there are real steps, increments that one makes, but one has to go in order. When you teach, let's say, math, you don't teach algebra or higher math before a student would understand even the basic multiplication table, 2 times 2, 2 times 3, 2 times 4, that sort of thing. I mean, it's very clear in math and many other things that you have to do things in order in a certain sequence. And so that practice flowchart, I mostly bring it in in that way with that practice flowchart. After a student has studied with me for a while, and we've talked a lot about practicing, I talk a lot about practicing in the lessons because, of course, we're with the student for an hour once a week or a little more, but the students are there by themselves, with themselves, for many, many more hours during the week. And if they don't understand how to practice and what to do, then they're just not going to make very much progress. So I spent a lot of time actually in talking about on various aspects of how to practice, including practice charts and just how do you tear apart spots, the usual kinds of things that most teachers do with their students. But that practice flowchart grew out of teaching a Duport etude that is the first time it sort of integrates for a student in that sort of sequential kind of way, going from neck positions to upper positions. And so I taught it to a bunch of students the regular way, and then I suddenly realized that I was saying the same exact thing to everybody. And I don't even need to be there. I could just have a tape recorder and turn on the tape recorder and say, now you do this, now you do that, then you do this. And if that doesn't work, you go back to this and whatever. And then I realized, well, it's kind of like a computer program that you just kind of program. Here's what I do. And if it's successful, I go on to this, yes. And if it's not successful, then I go back to that, no, and so forth. And it was a very sort of a logical approach. A lot of musicians are very right-brained. Creative and musical in that kind of sense. And for a lot of these students, I have to actually help build a left brain, literally build this logical kind of progression, understanding of what comes next kind of thing. And this chart really helped, especially those very right-brained people, but everybody, it helped make it clear about what you do when you're practicing something sort of difficult. Hopefully you can share that with people. It probably takes a little bit more explanation than just looking at the chart. So there is an article out there, probably on my website. I think I have it. If people are interested, they can look at the actual description of what you do for that. Similarly, with the checklist for teachers, I developed that through the String Project because I realized that a lot of teachers weren't really thinking about the kinds of things they should ask themselves, the kinds of questions they should ask themselves about a particular lesson, both in preparation for the lesson and during the lesson and after the lesson. And so I developed that list as a self-examination for people to kind of just review in their minds, are they doing the kinds of things that they need to do for their students? For example, goal setting. Are they setting a short-term goal, maybe 1 week, this is for the next week lesson? Are you writing this down in the notebook, and is it organized? A little bit longer term goal. Okay, so we have a recital at the end of the semester here. Let's work towards that. And then a very much longer term goal. So you're wanting to go to college. You want to become a music major. Here's what Are you doing these things for helping them to become at the level that's going to be needed to be a music major, with not only cello playing but also understanding music and theory and so forth. So there are lots of aspects to that checklist, but again, if you can share that, your listeners might be interested in trying it for themselves. And as you said, as our own teacher, because we are our own teacher, really, ultimately, it might be useful to look at it and think about, okay, am I doing the right things for myself? Especially those of us who are past the time of having somebody else as a teacher. So you're your own teacher, really.
All right. Yes, I highly recommend everything at your website. People who haven't checked it out yet need to. I say yet because I know I've pointed some of my students to it already.
Oh, thanks.
And another thing there that caught my eye, I'm a big fan of the Foyard Daily Exercises book. I tend to use it more for the left hand, like the finger independence things at the beginning, and use Sevchik for the right hand stuff. But I think you mine just about as much as anybody of the right hand exercises in Foyard. What is it that draws you to Foyard as opposed to other approaches, or what led you to that particular avenue in your blog?
Well, I kind of think of Foyard, the daily exercises, as our cello Bible. It has everything in there, really. It's a great compendium of almost every aspect of playing. But in particular, I really like, and I use it all with my students at various levels and at various times. The bowing exercises in the back, number 32, are so fantastic for building a basic bow arm, bow stroke, and so forth. And of course, the bow is the artistry of our playing. The left hand, yeah, we have vibrato, and that, of course, adds an incredible amount of artistry and sound variety to our playing. But the left hand, all it does is otherwise is make the notes. Everybody's fascinated with the left hand. The left hand, playing fast, all that kind of stuff. And when you play in a concert, everybody's always commenting on the left hand. How do you know where to put the fingers and so forth? But really, the artistry in playing the cello is the bow arm. That's where it's all about. And so what this does is, and by the way, I started when I started in Freiburg with Marcel Cervera. He did this with me. He did it slowly, going through all 5 pages, I guess, of the Foyer, number 32, 30, and so forth. And it gave me the model sort of how one can comprehensively teach a good bow arm. And so I do that with the students. I go very slowly through it. It takes usually about 2.5 years to go through all 5 pages. Sometimes more, depending on the rate of the student and so forth. Each one of those has to be really understood and comprehended and understood and figured out. And there's a lot to figure out when you start thinking about how to get a good sound with these things, how the contact point, the rules sort of the contact point. I had a student just recently, I just started a new student who's in 9th grade who plays really, really well. He's already playing on a pretty high level. But almost always, even my college students, I would take back to this number 32 of Foyer and start there. And it was amazing how much stuff this 9th grader that I just started, how much he didn't know, didn't understand. Very basic rules having to do with contact point, weight, and speed, which are addressed in the first page, or actually throughout the whole thing, but especially in the first couple of pages. Things like the higher the string, the lower the contact point. The lower the string, the slower the bow. The higher the string, the faster the bow. The shorter the string length, the closer to the bridge. I mean, all of these kind of rules, quote unquote, that one has to understand them and then internalize them, and they become intuitive. And you don't think about them all the time, but when needed, I have more notes in the bow. I'm playing a lot of notes in the bow. What do I have to do with the contact point? Well, you have to lower the contact point, so you use a slower bow. If you don't do that, you'll get a softer sound. You might be able to get all the notes in the bow, but it won't be a good sound, a full sound. Just understanding the difference between a core sound and a resonant sound, the two kind of extremes of sound that we have. All of these kinds of things, they need verbalization, and they need time to register, even if a student is already playing at a pretty high level. Going back to that is, I think, essential for almost everybody. It's something, by the way, I still go back to it now. And I mean, I'm doing it when I'm teaching the lessons. I'm kind of rethinking each one of these things, but so I don't have to play each one myself necessarily, but I am thinking about it again. Dotted rhythms, really hard for string players to play dotted rhythms. And one of the keys is to relax. Dum, bum, bum. So in the bum part, you want to relax the arm. Of course, I'm doing this backwards arm because I can't use this arm right now. But bum, bum. So I have an exercise where I go bum, relax, bum, relax, bum. And they have to actually say the word relax in a rhythmical fashion. All of these kinds of things, he was already playing a dotted rhythm, sort of okay, but to really understand what happens not only physically, but also just sound-wise, that the sound releases bum, 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 bum. So, I always say to the students, we're athletes. Cello players are athletes. We're small muscle athletes. We're not, this huge, big, but we have to understand how the body works and how to play in a relaxed kind of manner, be able to play in a recital or entire Bach suite or something. And that relaxation stuff starts very early. in the process of learning to play. And if one plays, totally like this, it's going to be very hard later on to learn to relax when you're playing Dvorak concerto and want to get through 40, 45 minutes of playing at a big sound if you don't understand how you release already early on. So I treat things very much as an athletic event in a way, and understanding the way a sports coach would be teaching and helping their players figure out how to throw the ball in a more relaxed way and better way. We do the same with talking about balance and talking about relaxation and those kinds of things.
Excellent, excellent. Now, I also want to talk, you touched on the string projects and ASTA. I think another thing of the many sessions of yours I've seen at ASTA conferences over the years, one of the ones I enjoyed immensely was on cello ensemble playing a few years ago, and that had a nice long list of suggested repertoire, which has only grown since then. But to what extent with your studio do you use cello ensemble as a way to teach some of them, help them teach each other and just listen to certain ways that they're using their bows or articulating or blending? What are your thoughts on cello ensemble and pedagogy?
Well, I think it's really important, and I encourage it for my students to do duets and things like that, and on some of their recitals. Almost every semester I had a cello choir with my studio, but the really big cello choir that we did and are still doing is called the South Carolina Cello Choir, which happens usually in September once a year. And it started at USC and at Furman University, and we went back and forth. We get about 200 cellists who come to that. It's an amazing event, 2-day event with master classes. We have guest artists, and we had many prominent cellists come in as guest artists, and then a full day of cello choir with these 200 cellists on stage of the Koger Center here. And it's been a wonderful sort of collaborative thing with the other cellists in the state. So the cellists at the other universities in South Carolina, and we attract people from other states all over the region, actually, who come to this. And it's meant for everybody from young kids to students and teachers and amateur players, which is a big growing part of our teaching, actually, and the people out there who are playing. Amateurs and professionals and orchestra players and so forth. And it's a great event. It's a one-day event, basically, with all those people. And as far as the cello choir, I think there's some of the cello choir blogs on my, cello choir videos on my website that people can see. We've commissioned pieces at various times for the big cello choir as well as for smaller groups. And I often take them out. My USC cello choir I would take out on the road a little bit and play for schools and concerts and other venues. So I think it's a really important thing.
Excellent, excellent. All right, projects that you have in the works. What's coming down the pike for you?
Well, I guess, since I can't play right now, unfortunately, so this happened the day before I was leaving for a music festival in Germany. I was in my condo in Toronto, and I came out of the shower and I slipped and I hydroplaned, basically fell over backwards, hit my shoulder, and tore these 2 tendons. And I went to the festival anyway and was there for a month in Germany, and I came back and it wasn't any better, so I had an MRI, and they determined that it was torn, and so I just now got the surgery. But so I'm going to be out of commission for about 8 months, probably at least, before I can actually play again, or really play well again. So one of the things I'm doing is I'm writing a scale book with a former student of mine who's now professor of cello at the University of Arizona, Teddy Buchholz. And he and I are on the same page, understanding our philosophy of scales, because he studied with me early on, I guess. And so we're having a great collaboration. We're almost at the end of actually writing it. And the idea about this scale book that's different from a lot of scale books that are out there. A lot of books have just a little one section on scales, and it gives one fingering and so forth. It might do 4 octaves or something. It doesn't even give the earlier ones. The idea of this scale book is that it's going to start from the earliest stages, just 1 octave scales for total beginners, Suzuki kids and so forth, who are doing 1 octave scales and arpeggios. And then building up through 2 octaves, 3 octaves, 4 octaves, but then also 6 and thirds and octaves. And along the way, also discussing various issues that are related to being able to play faster or with better sound or different sound, all different kinds of things, coordination, whatever. And so the idea is, again, part of my philosophy of the sequential method, the idea of doing things in a very stepwise fashion. And the idea for this book is going to be that teachers could use it for their students all along, or again, an amateur player might decide, okay, I'm going to start with the 2 octave scales. Maybe I don't need to do the 1 octave, start with the 2 octave, and then know what to do next, kind of, as opposed to jumping from one system to another that you may just happen to find in different books. I think that's one of the big problems with teaching that's out there, is that a lot of teachers are not really, they'll just sort of have the student come in and then respond to whatever that student is bringing in on that day, as opposed to having a kind of understanding of the ladder, the succession, the sequence of that a student really needs to build. So we don't know what's going to happen with the scale book. We originally were thinking that it was going to be a published book, a publication, but of course that's really difficult nowadays. Now we're thinking we're going to do something online, and along with that have video examples of things that we're talking about in the book, as well as I'm really excited by the idea of having a drone package on that website. And I've contacted one of my colleagues at USC, who's a jazz player actually, who's going to write a sequence of chords and record it, that not just one note like as a drone, but have chords that go through an entire, let's say, 2 octave scale, and then do a jazz version of it, or a rhythmical version of it that makes it sort of interesting to apply playing the scale with the understanding of a chordal thing underneath it. So that's that's sort of the latest, one of the latest parts of this project that we want to include if we do go with the website. But it's going to take a while before we finish this, and I'll let you know, certainly, Benjamin, about what we're doing when we get towards the end of it.
Terrific. Yeah, I have to say, it is kind of funny how it's easy to find a flaw, at least a flaw, with a lot of the available scale stuff that's out there for cello.
Yeah.
Either they kind of just group they go straight from the 2 octave to third and fourth, like the Foillard does, or something.
Right.
Or even if you want the student to get used to seeing C flat major as opposed to B major, but they only print it out in one or the other, just things like that. So good for you. That's definitely, I bet that'll have a lot of interest.
Hopefully, yeah. But it's a fun project anyway to be working on with Teddy. Great colleague.
Good, and that fun is important too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, Bob, best of luck with the shoulder.
Thank you.
Heart goes out to you. Hopefully everything will just go as speedy as possible.
It's ironic, this didn't happen from playing, but one of my teaching things is, as I said before, working on relaxation and so forth. And so I've been very proud of my studio over the years. I've had very few people who've had any kind of medical kind of issues in playing, of tendonitis or anything. Very, very few, just because we build things very well in that way. And, I've never had to cancel a concert in my life, and I've had no problems physically, again, thanks to my teachers, Severa and so forth, who did the same kind of thing with me. And then all of a sudden, our bodies are so sensitive, and you have an accident, and all of a sudden, in a 1 second fall, one's life is completely changed. So, they say that the 2 most dangerous places in the house are the bathroom and the kitchen. So my advice to everybody is stay out of the bathroom, stay out of the kitchen.
Stay in the practice room.
That's it.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Jesselson. This is very fun speaking with you as always. And to those of you in the audience, we'll hopefully have a weekend full of fun practicing, and see you again next Friday at 5. Take care in the meantime.